Good evening and welcome to the Evening News, the SVG-TV Evening News for today, Friday, August 6th. I'm Khalil Cato with the details. On the local scene in our lead story, Prime Minister Dr. Gonzalez was flown out to Barbados late last night for an MRI after he received an injury to the head close to his temple by an object thrown by a protester during yesterday's protest action. The protest was called for by the opposition, trade unions and other concerned citizens over the proposed changes to the public health laws, which will require frontline workers to take the COVID-19 vaccine. The morning period of the protest went down smoothly. However, things got rowdy in the afternoon. On his return to Parliament, protesters had blocked the entrance gate to the building, and the Prime Minister exited his vehicle to try to make his way in on foot. This was when a projectile was hurled in his direction, hitting him on his head. He was bleeding profusely and was rushed to the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, where a statement from his office said he would remain overnight for observation. However, later on in Parliament, it was announced by his son, Camilo Gonzalez, that based on the advice from the medical professionals at the hospital, it was necessary that a magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, be done to determine the extent of the injuries he sustained. Speaking on radio this morning, Acting Prime Minister Montgomery Daniel said that Dr. Gonzalez did the MRI in Barbados and is expected back home tomorrow.
On the assessment of the medical personnel, would have asked that he travel to do an MRI immediately. And so Prime Minister Gonzalez left last night for Barbados. And he is presently under the machine doing the MRI. My understanding equally is that there will be a second reflection on the test and so on that he is to do, and he may probably not be back in St. Vincent until tomorrow.
The acting Prime Minister said that the work of the government has to and will go on despite the unfortunate incident.
As I said, we are alive and well, and the Prime Minister, he's alive but not so well. But the country of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a blessed country. And life will go on as usual. We are a people that we are a loving, kind-hearted people. Unfortunately, you may have one or two persons who may step out of line. But of course, they on their own reflection, stepping out of line, will always reconsider what they would have done. And knowing what they would have done was wrong, will seek to have reconciliation.
And in Parliament last evening, the government side laid blame on the opposition New Democratic Party for the injury sustained by the Prime Minister, as it was one of the protesters who purportedly threw the stone that hit him on his head. Member of Parliament for South Central Windward, Saboto Caesar, who was close to the Prime Minister when he was hit, expressed disgust at what happened, noting that he was also threatened, which he did not take lightly. Caesar and the Prime Minister's son, who is the MP for East St. George, along with other members of the government side, said the NDP must be held accountable.
I was reminded of a recent protest here when projectiles were thrown at the vehicle of the Honorable Prime Minister. And the Honorable Leader of the Opposition went on the public airways and praised his supporters and instead berated the police. And not one word was said about the hurling of projectiles at the Prime Minister of a sovereign nation. Nothing. And that is the type of instigation that enables and empowers people.
Persons who are close to me are aware that I made a report at the Bayabu police station. The report is still there, and I've asked for it to be investigated. I did not know that today, as I stand here, blood stains, these are blood stains of Comrade Ralph, the member for North Central Windward. These are his blood stains on my shirt. And I'm telling you, I am going to do what it takes to ensure that there is justice in this country. There are some senators allegedly walking around, busting people's head, and nothing coming of it. But justice must be served in this country. I'm obliged by
the honourable member for Central Kingston, who I assume takes leadership on the opposition side. When the leader of the opposition is not present, he also has that responsibility. And every other member in this honourable house who sits on the opposite side of us.
Opposition leader Dr. Godwin Friday condemned the act against the Prime Minister and said he hopes the perpetrator is brought to justice. He said the NDP condemns all acts of violence.
In any action that I am involved in, I do not support any act of violence against any member of this honourable house or any person. I defend anyone's right to represent their democratic principles. It is not my way, Madam Speaker. So it is, I don't wish to conflate my own dissatisfaction with some of the comments I've heard the Honourable Member, the Honourable Minister made with respect to members on this side of the House, because he obviously was angry. I want to focus, Madam Speaker, on the report that the Prime Minister had been injured and to express my own disapproval, disavowal of any act of violence in any action that I'm involved in, and that I regret very deeply that happened today.
Just after midnight, Senator and General Secretary of the ruling Unity Labour Party administration, Julian Francis, announced in Parliament that the police have a woman in custody who said she committed the act and wanted to apologize to the Prime Minister.
You want to tell me you come back and hail it? We've been celebrating with them out there for busting Dr. Gonzalez head? Is that why you were late in coming back and then coming back and telling our deputy political leader, when you go and see Dr. Gonzalez, come back and report to me and give me a report? Madam Speaker, it is so atrocious, and this thing is not an accident. I want to say they lock up the woman. If you don't know Dr. Friday, they know who it be. And the police don't lock you up. And then begging to go and apologize to Dr. Gonzalez. I said, no apologies. Apology for what? Because you get locked up, you want to apologize? No, go and apologize to Dr. Friday. You can't go in front of my political leader and apologize to him. She in police custody. She don't get locked up. Might be others too.
While the woman in police custody accused of injuring the Prime Minister has claimed that she was coerced into admitting guilt. This is according to her lawyer, Kay Bacchus-Batiste, who told SVG-TV News via telephone interview that her client vehemently denies committing the act.
My instructions from her is that she did not hit the Prime Minister. She did not even have a stone in her hand, and she did not fire a stone. However, the police took her up based on somebody who was in the audience in the demonstration, or who said they saw her. And she said she did not do it, but the police took her up without legal counsel and intimidated her, threatened her, told a lie, said that they have footage of her throwing the missile, throwing the stone. She knew she did not throw the stone, but when the police had to say they have evidence of her doing it and people saying so, she got frightened and more or less apologized to the Prime Minister, apparently.
Bacchus-Batiste said her client has not yet been charged and there are many unanswered questions which need to be investigated.
Took her down to the hospital where he was and kept her there in the van, and then they took her to the police. I tried for like 2 hours to get in touch with her and could not find her. Eventually I got in touch with her after they took a statement from her where she's purportedly saying that she's the one who did it, though she insists she never used a stone. So I don't know what sort of magical wand really hit him. And So I told the police, the ones who's in charge of the investigation, that I am acting for her and they must make no further move without my presence. So I'm told up to now they have not yet charged her. They're still investigating. So to me it is a rush to judgment just to say that they find the person. They have not properly investigated. I guess that is why they haven't charged her yet. Because if they had believed that this was straightforward, they would have charged her already. They haven't charged her yet.
The defense lawyer says she hopes that the police finds the real perpetrator.
Yes, the person who perpetrated that act, they should bring them to justice. But it is not my client, and they're not going to make her into a scapegoat. There are many questions about that whole stone throwing incident. I was there, not so close by, but when I look at the crowd of police that was around him, I don't know how a stone could bypass everybody and hit him. I don't know. And then why didn't the police pick up the stone? There would have been blood in it. There are some issues that I find very strange about it.
A protester was also injured during yesterday's melee. John Mofford told SVG-TV News that he was taken to the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, but was turned away with no explanation, even though his wound was visible and bleeding.
I protested coming out there. Officer lady touched me from my shoulder from each time I spin up. She hit me about 3 minutes. It's protest. When I reach hospital, every time I reach hospital, this guy is at my hospital. Every time I reach me, he leave and drive me back. Black squad escort me back out the gate until the security don't let me come back to me. Now I'm afraid after with police
Okay, but how are you feeling right now?
I feel a little headache.
Mofford is also being represented by lawyer K. Bacchus Batiste.
He won't be able to go and do an MRI, of course. Fly out and fly back in and get just such immediate attention. What is appalling is that they chased him away from the general hospital twice.
Meanwhile, the physical assault on Prime Minister Dr. Gonzalez received local and regional condemnation. Heads of the two unions which were a part of yesterday's protest action, the SVG Public Service Union and the Teachers Union, denounced the violence that unfolded. President of the Teachers Union, Oswald Robinson, spoke with SVG-TV News about the union's disapproval of yesterday's events, noting that his organization does not condone violence.
Brothers and sisters in the teaching profession, fellow Vincentians, I want to use this opportunity as the president of the St. Vincent and Grenadines Teachers Union to publicly denounce, disassociate, and condemn the act of violence that has been demonstrated today on the Honorable Prime Minister, Rafi Gonzalez. It is very unfortunate that persons would have resort to inflict this form of violence on the Honorable Prime Minister. And I hope that the police will do their necessary investigation to bring the perpetrator or perpetrators to justice. I want to wish all the teachers of St. Vincent and Grenadines all the best, and be very calm, be very peaceful in all your deliberations. The Teachers Union is not a violent organization, and we do not support any act of violence.
PSU President Elroy Boucher also condemned the attack on the Prime Minister.
What we witness as it relates to the violence against the Prime Minister at the protest action, that's reprehensible, and the Public Service Union condemns all violence, in particular with the leader of the country, and that really ought not to have happened. The PSU participated in a peaceful protest against what we consider to be the erosion of our fundamental rights and freedoms. In no way we will condone any acts of violence against whether it is the leadership of the country or anybody else at any protest. Protests are supposed to be peaceful, to demonstrate one's opposition to whatever one is really protesting against. It was really quite appalling witnessing what happened. I pray that the Prime Minister would have a speedy recovery. I also prefer his family that even at this time, they may be comforted by God's grace, and that the perpetrator, whoever that person is, following the investigation and justice will actually take its course.
Despite the course of the events yesterday, Boucher said they will continue to protest as the government went ahead to have the amendments to the Public Health Act approved by Parliament, even with the widespread disapproval from members and other citizens.
We learned today that the amendments were actually passed early this morning, and it is unfortunate because our position against those changes remain the same, and it means clearly that we cannot give up the fight to defend our rights and freedom. We maintain that those changes are injurious to our fundamental rights and freedom, and as a trade union representing public servants, we have to do everything within our power to try and ensure that the rights of workers are protected. We would have thought that the government would have seen the different category of workers on the picket line. There were persons from customs, nurses, all across the public service. So they would have seen those persons on the picket line, and that should have been a signal that these changes to the law are not supported by public servants. Furthermore, it is clearly known that the majority of Vincentians, in fact, in my estimation, about 4/5 of Vincentians are opposed to mandatory vaccination.
President of the SVG Christian Council, the Reverend Adolph Davis, is also condemning the physical attack against the Prime Minister, noting that the violence which found its way into yesterday's protest is concerning.
I have no issue with the fact that people will have views and strong views about various matters and feel the need to protest. And I think that's part of what we have come to accept as part of our democratic narrative. But we have to be very careful when those actions degenerate into violence. And, one of the things I remember is following some of the historical reflection on the Martin Luther King Jr. and student nonviolent movement in the U.S. and how they were always careful to see how to preserve the integrity of those institutions, because violence changes the narrative. And I don't know if people are aware, but sometimes it discolors your goal. While it may seem to have value, but violence can discolor. And so it's always important to try and preserve the integrity of protests from violence. It's really sad that anybody got injured and that the Prime Minister as well got injured. And I think even in that regard, we also have to recognize the office of the Prime Minister and what this means as well for us as a nation.
Reverend Davis said what has been of equal concern has been some of the responses he has seen to the assault on the Prime Minister, whom he expressed best wishes to as he recovers.
I'm also concerned not only for the very act of violence, but I'm concerned about some of the narratives that have accommodated that. And it doesn't augur well for us as a nation. It's not an ambiguous event. We see this unfortunate thing happen. And then, you hear some of the stories or see some of the comments where, it's a celebratory kind of a response and, a good for you kind of an attitude. And that worries me, because whatever the act of violence perpetrated and whoever, even if you feel the person who is hurt is the most wicked person in the world, we can't become that kind of society where we celebrate violence on another person. You cannot celebrate violence on another person. And I think that for me is a major concern. Our prayers are, of course, with the Prime Minister, for his own healing. Our prayers are with all those involved in the protest and whoever was involved in actually causing the harm. And, we're really praying for our nation that we could figure out a better way of dealing with grievance and dealing with issues and move forward as a nation to build our nation together.
Meanwhile, Chair of the CARICOM Heads of Government, Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown, strongly condemns the physical assault on Prime Minister Gonzalez, deeming the assault serious and almost fatal. Prime Minister Brown, in a statement, said the introduction of violence into the political life of CARICOM is shameful and deplorable, and those responsible for it must be brought to justice with all due dispatch. He said the assault is all the more shameful because it occurred as the Prime Minister was walking into the National Parliament, the highest lawmaking body of the state, where a robust debate was taking place with full regard for democratic principles of dissent and discussion. The Antigua-Barbuda Prime Minister said there is no place for violence and personal physical assaults in CARICOM democracies where the rule of law prevails and rights, including the right to peacefully protest, are fully upheld. He said all law-abiding and well-thinking people of CARICOM should join in resolution that such gratuitous violence will not be tolerated in our peaceful societies. The chair of CARICOM said their prayers are with Dr. Gonzalez for a speedy recovery, noting that he has been and remains an invaluable Caribbean son and leader deserving of the greatest respect. The University of the West Indies is also expressing dismay and disappointment in the development in Kingstown that resulted in physical injury to Prime Minister Gonzalez. The UWI Vice-Chancellor, Professor Hilary Beckles, said that the event featured the hurling of a missile intended to injure Dr. Gonzalez. It constituted an act of hooliganism against his personhood and of vandalism against the collective nationhood. He said the university community condemns the dastardly action and joins with the resilient and heroic people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines who have risen time and time again to validate the leadership of the comrade who has provided for decades a model of progressive post-colonial democratic politics. The UWI Vice-Chancellor said it is cowardly for any individual, interest group or opposition force to resort to stone throwing in the midst of a complex national discourse in which saving lives and rebuilding the economy are on the table, noting that neither the nation nor its leader should be the subject of this madness in the aftermath of what has happened in Haiti, the daily COVID-19 devastation of African people, and in the aftermath of George Floyd. According to the UWI Vice-Chancellor's statement, Caribbean people are located at the center of a contemporary conversation about a new emerging world order, and such actions place a stain on the excellent reputation of the Vinci community. And while it is a mark made by a small minority, it will be erased by the unrelenting efforts of the majority. Sir Hilary ended his statement by saying Citizen Gonzalez knows better than most the nature of such things, and no doubt will return to the center of the conversation clearer and stronger than before. Following an overnight stay at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Barbados, the Prime Minister has been discharged with no neurological deficits noted. The PM, who issued a statement earlier today, said he was flown to Barbados after arrangements by the Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley and his wife Eloise on the advice of medical professionals at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital.
Result of the concussion which I have suffered, I have to have monitored over the next 4 to 6 weeks my condition, and to do in 4 to 6 weeks' time another series of tests and examination to see if any bleeding emerges in the brain as a result of the concussion. I will follow his advice to the letter. Dr. Ossie, consultant in St. Vincent and the Grenadines at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, accompanied me to Barbados, and he was with me at all times when Dr. Gill did all the examinations and the various technicians did all the requisite tests and inquiries. I am thus in good medical hands, and Dr. Ossie is seized of all the relevant information about my health condition.
The Prime Minister thanked the hundreds of persons who have reached out to his family to stand in solidarity with him, while he noted the seriousness with which he has taken the assault against him.
The person who threw the object at me, the projectile, that it hit me in my head, at the top of the head. It could easily have come, as the doctors tell me, lower down to the temple, and where there could have been immediately far more serious damage. I take the assault upon me not just as an injury or an act of battery, but when you throw a stone or some other projectile at someone with the intention to hit them in their head, and given the delicate nature of one's head, you have in mind the intention to kill. You have the intention to cause serious bodily harm, because the object which you're throwing doesn't have a laser designed to miss me. The intention was to hit me, and they did, and to cause me serious damage or even loss of life.
The Prime Minister Gonzalez, also noted that while persons are within their rights to protest, a duly elected parliamentarian should not be stopped from entering the House of Parliament. He added that he would further discuss the situation at a later date. COVID-19 Delta variant detected in SVG. This and other stories when we return with more local news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Delta variant of COVID-19 has been detected here in SVG. This was announced in a statement today by Acting Prime Minister Montgomery Daniel, who said the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment was informed this morning by the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARICOM, of the detection. Daniel said they were informed that of the COVID sequencing results of samples received on July 27th. One sample detected a variant of concern, B16172, which is the Delta variant. He also noted that the sample was collected during entry screening at the Argyle International Airport from a fully vaccinated traveler who arrived in the state from England with a negative PCR result on July 21st. The molecular lab of the Ministry of Health, however, reported on July 22nd that the traveler tested positive for COVID.
The molecular lab unit of the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment reported on July 22nd that the traveler had tested positive. The adult then transitioned from 48 hours hotel quarantine to private isolation. Routine contact tracing detected 2 other COVID-19 positive cases associated with this traveler. These positive contacts are also travelers to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. 2 of these 3 persons have since tested negative for COVID-19.
The acting Prime Minister said in light of the presence of the highly contagious variant of the COVID-19 causing virus in SVG, the Ministry of Health is asking that the public increases compliance with the basic public health measures.
The Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment is asking the public to increase their compliance with the basic public health measures of correct mask use, physical distancing, and hand sanitizing. The ministry once again urges all eligible members of the Vincentian public to get vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus disease now.
The Delta variant is said to account for 93% of the new COVID-19 cases in the U.S. and the associated illnesses and deaths. Even after the large protest action yesterday against the Public Health Amendment Bill 2021, it was successfully passed in Parliament after extensive debate. The bill was tabled by Minister of Health, Wellness and the Environment, Sinclair Jimmy Prince, who said the amendments sought to modernize the existing public health legislations to prevent, control and contain the spread of COVID-19. Minister Prince said that the 1977 Act bestowed robust powers on the authorities to suppress the spread of communicable diseases.
So some modification had to be made, hence the proposed amendments that we're bringing here to the House today. is yet another aspect of our response to this emergency that has crippled this entire globe and which threatens to derail completely our social and economic situation here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is nothing more, it is nothing less. This amendment requires certain frontline workers to be vaccinated in the public interest. Of course, we have been hearing all throughout the country about rights and whose rights we want to take away. But we're not hearing the other part, whose rights have been infringed as a result of the monopoly which some people think they have on rights.
Minister Prince spoke on the various provisions of the bill which deals with having all frontline workers being vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine. He said frontline workers can be exempted under 2 conditions. However, on the medical ground, the Chief Medical Officer will be given the power to require a person seeking exemption to submit to an examination by 1 or more medical practitioners.
From an order for medical examination by a medical practitioner and from an order requiring a person who has a communicable disease to place himself under the care and treatment of a medical practitioner who is acceptable to a health officer. A person can be so exempted if the person makes a statement in writing that the person believes that the medical treatment for the prevention or cure of the disease is prejudicial to the person's health or that the person's beliefs are opposed to it, and furnishes the statement to the health officer. The new section, Madam Speaker, 27B, would provide for exemptions from an order requiring a person who has a communicable disease to place himself under the care and the treatment of a medical practitioner only where a medical practitioner acceptable to the medical officer of health, as the medical officer of health, certifies in writing that the medical treatment for the disease is not advisable on the medical grounds or grounds stipulated in the certificate.
The Health Minister said that the bill will go a long way in tidying up the Public Health Act and give the government the leverage needed to better respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and put the country on a better path to normalcy.
Now, Speaker, now that we have experienced a pandemic, we must consider whether it is reasonable for a citizen infected with a communicable disease to be exempted from treatment for that communicable disease on the ground of personal belief when the entire community could be threatened by the communicable disease. I think this is the area that we're trying to zero in on, and that is why, of course, we are talking about frontline people. It is not an attack on the fundamental rights and freedoms of our people, as some opportunistic commentators will have us believe. And it certainly does not violate freedom of conscience. On the contrary, Madam Speaker, it underpins our duty as a government to protect the well-being of our country. That is our job, and we ought to do it. We have to keep people safe. We have to ensure that the workplaces are safe for those people who want to work.
Opposition leader Dr. Godwin Friday, MP for East Kingstown, Fitzgerald Bramble, and other members of Parliament on the opposition side made it clear that they could not support the amendments to the legislation. The opposition members told Parliament that there are consequences set out in the bill which are immediate and intended to make the COVID-19 vaccine not voluntary anymore, hence the reason they oppose the bill.
Voluntary immunization, that what you are saying is that the immunization could be, it opens the way for mandatory immunization. So that is, Madam Speaker, something that I have opposed, my party has opposed, and we have urged the consultative process. We have urged, Madam Speaker, that information be presented to people. I can't believe we have had for a whole year Luther singing the same public service announcement about things you can Lego this and Lego that. When in fact, Madam Speaker, there are so many more things that can be done to win trust and to provide information to people so they can make a decision for themselves.
When people are so passionate about the welfare and development of their country, and they are forced to conclude that they are excluded from the decision-making process, it creates a problem. And we can argue and debate as much as we want, but the reality is, because I'm a man on the ground, just like many of us are here, the reality is that a lot of people are of the view that this particular bill is an early step to mandatory vaccination.
On the government side, Minister of Education Curtis King and Government Senator Kiesel Peters shared their reason for supporting the amendments to the Public Health Act.
Have you believe and have the Vincentian public believe that this government, is making vaccination mandatory? Madam Speaker, that is a lie. And I will tell you why it is a lie. The Public Health Act was passed in 1977, 44 years ago, before St. Vincent and the Grenadines gained its independence, before the enactment of the Constitution Order of 1979, the Public Health Act was passed.
Assessment done, and the impact that, among other things, the COVID-19 pandemic is having on our students. We have to get them back in school. We can't get them back in school if we have a serious spike in the coronavirus. You heard the Minister of Tourism. He was at pains pointing out the efforts aimed at bringing back some level of activity in the tourism industry.
There is only one thing that the world has accepted, the people who are trained and know about these things, that vaccination, whichever it is, and somebody said to me one time, the best vaccination is the one that you could get. Don't wait for the other one.